Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If you can take your seats, please. Just to clarify, this session is the biggest waste, but on finished vehicle logistics. If you were looking for the session on parts logistics, that's in the room next door. So this is the finished vehicle logistics discussion on the biggest waste. That's waste, W-A-S-T-E, and not a reflection on the failure of my diet plan. So the thinking behind the session of the biggest waste was, it started off with arguments that I was having with Edgar Pezzo from General Motors, a little bit about language, that we talked about eliminating waste. And my argument was that it sounded negative and that we should talk about adding to the profitability of a company, not eliminating waste or eliminating cost. That we should, be more positive and talk more positively about logistics. But it did make me think about what are the biggest wastes. We spend, and it's almost the whole point of the whole conference, we spend a lot of time doing and operating and perhaps not enough time thinking. So if you asked, a lot of logistics executives, they'd say eliminating waste is one of the most important tasks. And yet, we kind of just get on with that without stopping and thinking, well, what are the biggest wastes? How do we identify them? And how do we set a plan to really attack some of these wastes as opposed to just, day-to-day, just doing our jobs on a day-to-day basis? So it made me think maybe we should have a discussion about it. I started with a discussion on LinkedIn, on my LinkedIn group. And if any of you are on LinkedIn, please connect with me or link with me or whatever it is. Because it was an interesting discussion. I did a small survey on what were the biggest wastes in automotive logistics. And then we had a small discussion from that. We then had a discussion at the Finished Vehicle Logistics Conference on the biggest waste. And Andrea Amico from Jack Cooper actually said, maybe we probably need about an hour to discuss what are the biggest wastes in finished vehicle logistics. So that's one of the reasons we put this session together. And of course, Andrea then doesn't attend, but we've got Jack Cooper well represented here. And it pleased Edgar Pezzo that from General Motors, if you don't know him, that after all the arguments I've had with him about talking about eliminating waste, that actually put it as one of the main sessions in our conference as well. So, is eliminating waste one of the most important factors? Is it something that's, that's on your day-to-day mind? What are the biggest wastes? How do we look at them? How do we measure them? How do we solve them? Is it something that's done by an individual, by a company? Is it being done by the whole group? That's the purpose of this discussion. Once again, we've been very fortunate in putting a great panel together, including a car maker, a logistics service provider, or a solution provider perhaps, and an important automotive association. But to kick off the discussion, I'd like to welcome to the podium Marc Brazeau, the head of NAFTA Vehicle Transportation for Chrysler. Thank you, Marc.
I don't have to push on this one. Okay, good. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking the time out to join us on this session. So I guess waste has replaced collaboration as the next 10-year buzzword for us, and we'll work towards solving that. I got a really brief presentation, nothing provocative in it, frankly. It's just an overview of Chrysler and where we are, FCA, I should say, and where we are, and how we're doing this year compared to last year, and how we've been growing. And the reason I thought it was appropriate, at least to kick off and set the tone for what I think is going to be a decent panel session, particularly if we get some good questions around waste, is, in this period of growth that we've had, the more complex our organizations become, and I know in FCA's case, becoming Chrysler's group within FCA is becoming more and more of a global, having a global footprint, global presence. That complexity, particularly in a period of growth, can lend itself to adding a lot of unseen waste to our system, and it takes a lot of discipline to really dig in to everything that we do and identify the things that are true waste, things that we can truly impact and drive out of the system to save cost and improve margin, not just for us, but for our service providers as well. But on the finished vehicle side, there's an added layer of complexity in that all of you work with all of us collectively, and there's a collective shared asset approach that I think we're seeing in the marketplace, people working more closely together, and I think there's a reason for that. I think technology plays a big role in that, and I think where we are in terms of transparency and visibility bodes well for our efforts to reduce waste as we're growing, the efforts to reduce waste that will allow us to maybe ride through some of the eventual downturns at some point. So we'll quickly go through some of this, then I'll get off the stage and we'll get to everyone else and get to the questions. So nothing I say here is going to have any meaning in the marketplace for the rest of the day or the rest of the year. So I'm just going to go quickly through who we are, the brands that everyone's mostly familiar with, and I want to talk about a few of the things in the brands that are going to be interesting for us, should be interesting for you guys. Some of our award-winning vehicles, our manufacturing footprint, global sales, financials, and then finally our commitment to the environment, and then some of the thought starters that I'd like to throw out to the crowd. There we go. So as everyone knows, we're a global company, and we've gotten more and more complex, at least from Chrysler's standpoint. 78,000 employees worldwide, 37 manufacturing facilities, and we sell our vehicles in over 150 marketplaces. You know, the challenge for us, at least from a Chrysler perspective, is that we've always been a net exporter of vehicles, but not to the scale that we are today, certainly not to the scale that we've grown in the last 5 years. And we've certainly not been a net importer of vehicles that we've had. And we've seen this balance, you know, this import-export balance is creating a lot of challenges for us, a lot of opportunities, granted, to smooth out some operations. But it certainly is a challenge for us going from a net exporter, a small volume net exporter, to a more of a large import-export company. So I want to put the brands up specifically to highlight a few of them, particularly Jeep, Fiat, and Alfa. I think you've heard in the news, and it should be no surprise, the Jeep brand globally has been doing fantastic, and we've established more products within that line that we think are attractive to other markets, other countries, other regions, and I think our global sales and the performance of the Jeep brand has really proved that out. Fiat, on the other hand, coming to North America, is doing just as well, and we're hitting our targets with the vehicles that we're bringing in. I think they're exciting vehicles, but I think the exciting thing for us is the Alfa brand and the reintroduction of Alfa into North America. I think we've got a lot of really strong products that will compete in some non-traditional Chrysler areas that are going to be surprising to most people, but that's going to have a volume impact on us. That's going to have a significant volume impact. The investment we're making in Alfa and reintroducing Alfa Romeo to North America is an important piece of our plans in the next few years. So a few of the award-winning products, certainly, you know, you're familiar with the Chrysler 300C. Recently, it won the Texas Auto Writers Association Car of Texas. The Ram 1500 is always in high marks with most of the annual awards, and the Alfa Romeo 4C, 2015 Automobile Magazine's All-Star. And if you've ever had a chance to drive one, they're a ton of fun. Getting into them and getting out of them for someone my size isn't as graceful as it looks like on the commercials, but once you're in them and once you're driving them, they're a ton of fun, and they have a great price point. So what have we been doing to keep pace with the growth on the volume side? Well, we're directly investing in North America production, and you know, with the UAW negotiations behind us going to ratification, I think there's been some news out in the marketplace that, you know, needs to be needs to have some follow-up to it, but at the end of the day, we are investing over $5 billion in our capacity and plants in North America, in the US and Canada, and we've added 30,000 jobs worldwide. So we're investing where we need to be investing in the products that we think are going to really continue to drive us forward. Investments not only in the vehicles themselves, but also powertrain. We've invested in our Indiana plants, our Michigan plants, and our Ohio plants, and the result of that has been award-winning. Where am I pointing, Louis? That corner, got it. As they're waving in the background over here, you need a flag. The result in that investment, we've got awards, 10 best engines for 2015, the Hellcat, which has been a great seller for us, a buzz model that's driving a lot of interest in that product, and then the 3-liter Eco Diesel that we're really proud of. So global sales, you know, our track since 10, I mean, it's been pretty phenomenal, you know, from 1.5 million all the way up to, you know, 2.8 last year, and I think we're going to be a little higher this year. And you've seen some of the 5-year trends at other conferences, and you know, maybe this morning. You know, we expect our sales and we expect our penetration in a variety of segments to be strong. And again, with that growth and at that growth pace, you know, sometimes we introduce complexity into our own plans. And you know, as Louis said earlier, sometimes we're too busy managing the operations and don't take enough time to step back and see, you know, are there things that we did last year that we can do better this year? Are there things that we've done forever that we maybe shouldn't be doing anymore? And what's the overall network cost or enterprise cost to doing those things? So what does it mean for NAFTA? What does it mean for North America? Well, if you look at the plans for what we're going to be doing, you know, between 2013 and 2018, where we were on the import, as I was saying about the net export, you know, in 2018, we expect to have localized production of close to 2.6 million, but the real key is that balance between import and export. You know, we really think that we're going to have almost a 1-for-1. And, you know, so what challenges does that give us as an OEM, and how do we translate that challenge to our service providers, particularly around port strategy, port facilities? You know, what services do you do at the port versus at a plant? What services do you do at the dealerships versus a port? What's the infrastructure challenges going to be for us in 2018 to be able to handle, you know, this type of, you know, 10-fold increase in volume, both inbound and outbound? So we're looking at these things now. We're looking to our carrier base and to our partners to help us plan in a way that eliminates waste up front, as opposed to just reacting operationally and realizing that, you know, we're spending way too much money for something that had we spent more time up front planning, we can be better at. So our financial performance, this is, you know, public record. You know, net revenue year over year, 2014 to 13 for full year was up 15%. Adjusted net income up 31%. Worldwide sales of vehicles were up 15%, and our market share has been steadily growing up. So we're really proud of the performance of the company, but you know, we don't achieve any of this without all of our partners, and frankly, we don't achieve this without you know, everyone else on the outbound side, the other OEMs, our service providers, the shared asset network adjusting to this growth, because we're not the only ones growing. So it's been a challenge for all of you. I think we recognize that. And I think the great opportunity moving forward, now that we're coming into maybe a stable, although high, you know, annual forecast in terms of vehicles, it's a real opportunity now. If this is the new normal for the next few years or next couple of years, what can we identify as waste up front? What can we pull out? And how can we plan for the future more effectively? The last thing, because we're talking about waste, I just wanted to make sure that you know, that we highlighted the fact that FCA has been nominated as or identified as a Michigan Green Leader, specifically around the waste components that we've pulled out of our plants and our manufacturing here in Michigan, in terms of, you know, how we handle resources into the plant, electricity, utilities, water usage, that type of thing. So I thought it would be a good opportunity give kudos and highlight the focus of waste that we have within the company. So for today's purposes, I don't want to be provocative in terms of a slide, and I don't think any of this is provocative, frankly, but I just want to create thought starters as we go through the next speakers that, Louis did ask in the Finished Vehicle Logistics Conference earlier this year what we thought the biggest waste was, and I think you got a variety of answers, 3 or 4 different answers, kind of along the same thing. But these are the things that I think collectively we need to work on, and again, it's not a supplier issue, it's not an OEM issue, it really is an opportunity for all of us to work together. Capacity planning and utilization, that we say that for years, it's definitely a part of everybody's daily job, but we're certainly looking to find ways to do it better, do it more collectively, and identify where the shared asset component of the network that we use can come together, collectively to eliminate some real big waste issues. Network velocity and dwell time. I think that's been a real rallying cry for us as volume has gone up and as we've gone through a variety of seasonal impacts. I'm encouraged by the discussions that I've been having with the service providers in terms of how you're all prepared going into this next winter and how you've invested in surge capacity. And we're trying to keep up as OEMs to help by focusing where we have the biggest impact for you. I think that's on dwell time at destination ramps or at origin ramps. And we're going to work diligently with you guys to try and improve that. And then finally, the big thing, which is more of a long term, if we looked at these 3 things, is where do we identify duplication of efforts that aren't competitive advantages to us as an industry? So, I think we have to have an honest discussion and discourse around what do we consider outbound logistics in terms of its components and where are the competitive advantages to the OEMs that they want to maintain. But there's a whole wide variety of areas that don't present a competitive advantage to any of us, and that maybe locks us into certain waste behaviors when designing our networks and working with all of you. So to me, those are the 3 thought starters for the panel. So with that, thank you very much, and I'll give it up.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you for your thoughts on the 3 topics there that you've suggested, and I'm sure that's something that we'll come back to, and I will also be asking members of the audience your thoughts on what is the biggest waste that you can see in your industry. But when I did the actual survey amongst the car makers, the biggest waste, both inbound and outbound, but okay, and this time we're looking at finished vehicle logistics, is shipping air and poor truck and fill rate. And I was just wondering if Bill Pawluk had ever really thought about that, if it's something he'd ever considered. So I'd like to welcome to the podium Bill Pawluk, the Chief Executive of CTM.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for attending this session, not the other one. The other one isn't really that important. Waste. We want to talk about waste, and I'm going to say I was going to title this Waste Through Innovation. Louis had asked me to perhaps go on the innovation panel because that's kind of what we're all about. We're trying to innovate some new equipment, new ideas, new concepts into the industry to try to make the industry more efficient, of course. But I wanted to get in on this waste panel, so I kind of convinced Louis here to give me a shot at this. So bear with me. But waste, elimination of waste through innovation, that's the topic for me today. There we go. So inbound, outbound, anybound, I want to plant that thought in your minds today just for after when I do the rest of this presentation, you can think about it in slightly different terms. Definition of waste, I'd like to discuss that. Dictionary definition, use or expend carelessly, extravagantly, or to no purpose. That's what the dictionary defines as waste. We know we can do something better, yet we don't. I think that's clearly something that we can understand as waste, all of us. Another definition I'd like to talk about is logistics. The detailed coordination of a complex operation involving people, facilities, and/or supplies, perhaps transportation, etc., based on a variety of principles to drive business agility, scalability, and innovation, reduce costs and increase efficiencies, enhance visibility, productivity, and inventory accuracy, simplify compliance, and mitigate risk. These are all principles behind logistics. And then we talk about waste. And with all those fancy words and all that terminology, yet for some reason I believe we have tremendous waste in this industry. Am I pointing in the right direction, Mark? Is this right? There we go. So, first example, I don't know if many of you know, but 2,900 gallons is required to make one pair of jeans today. Seems like an astronomical number to me. I wasn't aware of that until we did some research. To me, it seems like that's waste. But maybe that's what it takes. I don't know. Good thing that water is recyclable. But we know that water is coming at a premium in many regions of the world. In the US alone, 2.5 million plastic bottles are thrown away every hour. We're doing it right here at this conference. It's a lot of bottles. That's every hour on the hour. We can shrink wrap Texas every year with all the plastic film that we throw out. So I think there's a lot of waste, and I think we all understand and identify there's a ton of waste, and yet there's technology out there. We talk about all this innovation this morning. The panel talked about computers and how they've advanced us and exponentially in the last few years. So, and I'm thinking that with all that technology, we can find a way to start removing some of that waste. 40% of the food in the US is never eaten. That seems to be an astounding number as well. But it's real. These aren't my numbers. These are numbers that are based on others' research. So, of course, I'm going to bring up the empty waste and capacity in the auto logistics industry at 42%. That's a well-known number here in North America. I think that's tremendous waste. And Louis asked me not to promote our convertible trailer. Of course, I'm not actually here to do that. I think if this is just an awareness campaign, but from our perspective, we have our own vision of how to mitigate that risk, reduce that risk. And that is, of course, through the concept of the convertible trailer. But 42% empty miles just because a piece of equipment is only dedicated to do one thing and one thing only, and that's haul vehicles. And we've got all this technology and we've got all this evolution that we've identified, and yet we're still allowing ourselves to do just that. 8 billion liters of diesel every year in the industry around the world, and 75 billion a year wasted on inefficient, not just empty, but inefficient auto transportation. Tremendous number. 20 billion kilograms of needless CO2 in the atmosphere. So the wastes of our industry include time, of course. Time's a big one. Profit. Progress. Resources, non-renewable resources. We know that we're actually burning up fuel that we can't actually make later. Don't know how we plan on fixing that. We're wasting capacity. We've talked about capacity crunches here because the industry is growing, investing in more assets. Boy, that's a big problem. Yet we've got existing capacity. And all we have to do is get smart and figure out how to use that existing capacity more efficiently. This is our belief. Empty road capacity today, empty rail car capacity, as well as ro-ro vessels. All of them have empty capacity, closer to 50% than not. What are we doing to help reduce this? And so I'll go through a few slides here to talk about it. So we talk about converting it, make a multi-purpose piece of equipment, something that can do more than just transport vehicles, as mentioned before. Got something that can actually do something besides. A flat deck trailer, anybody recognizes that. provide the flat deck industry with a piece of equipment that's recognizable and usable in their systems, and away you go. You will be in business. I did it myself. I did it, albeit with 20 trucks a few years back. Made quite a bit of money from that. I believe in it so much, I've invested all that money right back into it because I do believe it belongs in this industry and it can be scaled if we all put our heads together. This is not the transport side fault. It's not the OEM fault, as Marc mentioned earlier. This is an industry-wide problem, and it's time for us to collaborate, fix it. Contain it. We need to create some dry space on these flat deck assets, whether it's road, rail, or ocean. Got to find a different way of creating some sort of dry space that, if we were to use containers, of course, we can't use containers on auto carrier rail cars or ro-ro vessels. They just don't fit. So we either change out the entire asset base to something brand new, or we try to work with the existing asset base. And the shortest distance between where we are today and where we plan on going, where we believe we should be going, is to create a convertible trailer, an Autobox perhaps. And these are just the beginning of solutions. There's many other solutions, but these are hardware pieces that can help us. And control it, we refer to this as software-based intelligence, data that we can bring together. And with the help of a company called Inform, many of you already know from Germany, they have collaborated with us to create a platform that can identify whether it's a vehicle with wheels on it or whether it's an Autobox with no wheels on it. The computer program does not care, and it will assign the dispatch of an Autobox just as it will a vehicle or a container or any kind of general freight. But we need a system that can work on this two-level type approach. So controlling it is just having the intelligence to understand what fits where. Surely we can do that. And the only barrier we believe to this point in history in this industry has been just the type of equipment that's been used. So here we've just got a few slides to demonstrate. This is actually a theoretical map, although we actually have real data now that's inputted into a system that can identify automotive flows. And we've done a study for Europe. We've figured out where all the automotive flows are today. And now we are cross-pollinating that information with other, perhaps, inbound automotive or maybe even non-automotive products. Inbound opportunities, we're overlaying them over top of your outbound routes. And this is industry-wide. This isn't specific to Chrysler or GM or Toyota. This is industry-wide where we've got anybody and everybody in the game. Bringing automotive logistics closer to general freight logistics so we can use that scale to help us. But we have to overcome some problems because we're all used to doing things the way that we've always been doing them. So we got to jump out of that. Inbound opportunities, when we bring them together, and we've recognized now many real lanes that do exist. The next study that we are doing and the information that we are inputting into this system is North America. We know that there's countless opportunities here to cross-pollinate those routes once again. Create balance. Today there's imbalance, lots of it. That's where our waste exists. And then create an entire system, industry-wide, that can create flow balance. That's the whole idea. We welcome anybody, everybody. We're not the first ones to come up with this idea, but I believe we're the first ones to follow through with it and continue on. We've got some great pilot projects coming up here, non-US based. We've got some legislation issues still here in North America, but we are working on some new pilot projects here in North America to do exactly that. Combine inbound, outbound, and as we say, anybound. We don't care. Make that equipment more efficient. So anybody, everybody, come on and join us. Jack Cooper has gone out of their way to participate in this project with us. They've supported us now for several years. And so we thank Mike Riggs and his team for participating in this and trying to make the industry a better place. We welcome any and all of you to do so. And not just transport companies. OEMs, of course. We need OEMs supporting us and making these pilot projects possible so we can prove it out and get the whole industry from top to bottom understanding that this can work and we'll get that waste reduced. We have to. We can't continue running around empty 42% of the time. Anyhow, in conclusion, everybody's heard of LOL. You guys are all familiar with LOL, lots of laughs and lots of love. I heard one 2 nights ago. LOL definition is love of logistics. And I don't know if that person had drank too many beer or maybe he was sincere, but I just thought that was a great one. I thought I'd leave you guys with that. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bill. I was disappointed. I thought LOL meant love of Louis, so I was a bit disappointed with your version of it. But an interesting presentation, again, looking at the amount of waste that's out there in every industry, but obviously we're focusing on automotive here. Just a little bit of news. You might have seen I was a little bit busy on the phone while I was on stage because I've been getting a lot of calls from Wolfsburg in Germany that Martin Winterkorn's resigned as the CEO of Volkswagen, but it's okay. I've said no. I'm sticking with automotive logistics, so you can relax. Next up, talking about biggest wastes, I'd like to welcome to the podium from AIAG, an important association for the automotive and automotive logistics industries, Bill Kerrigan, their program manager for finished vehicle logistics supply chain.
Good morning. Here we go. There we go. First, I want to thank Louis and Karen and Chris and the entire Ultimedia staff for allowing me to represent AIAG here at the conference this morning. I'm going to go through a little bit about what we're trying to do at AIAG to hope reduce waste and maybe help the industry move along in terms of establishing new standards and guidelines. But before that, you won't see me in the program, by the way, because Donald Trump was supposed to be here, but Louis asked me to come in his place. So, and then at the cocktail party last night, I can't see the carrier in the room, and I probably shouldn't name him, but they said, "Hey, Bill, do you know what the difference between a accurate OEM forecast is and Bigfoot?" I go, "No. Some people have actually seen Bigfoot." So sorry, Mark. So, to get right onto it, I also want to point out that my very good friend is in the room from ECG. Can you stand up and take a bow, please, sir? All right. And we are trying to align ourselves with ECG as far as what we're doing to establish outbound finished vehicle logistics guidelines. They've been very helpful for us in getting us kick-started in the areas of operational training and guidelines. They've put together an enormous survey of European FVL providers that we hope to duplicate for North America at some point, so we can provide the information that you need to get your job done. As Scott Charlin, who's the executive director of AIAG, told me a long time ago, our mission at AIAG is to provide a neutral, legal, and compliant place for exchange ideas and find solutions, and that's what we do. For years, they were involved mainly on the inbound side of the business. It's only been in the last few years that we've got involved on the outbound side of the business, finished vehicle logistics. We've recently added a new supply chain director in the name of Lang Ware, who's in the other room with the packaging people. He will head our project team as we look to add more members on the FVL side. We have a good representation now from the ports and the railroads and the haulaway associations. And we're looking to add some more of the steamship lines, the ports, more ports, processors, inspection companies, et cetera, get these people in the room, get them thinking, because there's a lot of obviously good knowledge and good experience in this room. And that's what we're trying to do. And we appreciate the support that these member companies have given us, because without their volunteerism, nothing would get done. We realize you have day jobs, very important day jobs. In many cases, I'm sure some of you are doing 2 and 3 types of jobs, but we need your support in order to continue this effort. Focus today is on FVL, waste in the chain. You know, what have we learned and where do we need to be? I really think we need to step back, and everyone said it this morning, and maybe do a reality check of the industry. I mean, we're so busy making cars now. It's great. Detroit's humming. We're back to pre-2009, 2008 levels. But we're running into the same problems that we had back then. We need to learn how to utilize the capital assets that we have now, not just the rail and truck and ships, but the ports and the property that we have, because I guarantee you they're not building any new port property. We need to really learn how, and we've talked about this, to break down internal and external silos when we're looking at networking a supply chain, especially on the finished vehicle side. You know, this is the traditional way that people look at how things work on the outbound side. You know, you have your sales team at the OEM, the design team, a purchasing team, and the poor guys in logistics have to make all 3 of them happy, okay? What I feel needs to happen is we got to move towards more of an accurate forecast, because with the assets we have out there, the way the model works now, everyone rushing at the end of the month to deliver vehicles, it puts a real strain on the capacity. You know, to some extent, even flow of vehicles, I know it's probably a pipe dream, but is it something we can aim for at least? And be able to manage exceptions, because I think most of the OEMs, and maybe hope Marc agrees, that's what they want done by their suppliers, okay? We know that 95, 96, 97% of the time everything goes right. It's that 2-3% of the time when things don't go right that we need to be prepared. Is the industry there yet? I'll leave that up to you, but where does our next wave of efficiencies come from? The supplier dollars, you've pretty much driven down those costs as far as they're going to go, in my opinion. There we go. So it's not very likely you're going to get some more savings on that side. They need revenue, and I've heard it from lots of people, obviously, to invest and attract quality personnel and to, buy more capital assets, right? You all know that. So how do we get there? Visibility. We talk about it. It's the inbound side of the business has done a great job of it over the years. We haven't done a very good job of it over the last 10 years. I don't think we're any farther along than we were 10 years ago. Metrics, I think there's a lot of internal metrics out there, but, you know, are they published? Benchmarking, I think this scares a lot of people. They don't want to be benchmarked. Collaboration, I don't like the word any more than Marc does. It should be cooperation, but you have to do it in a legal environment. We've seen what happens in this industry when you don't do things in a legal environment. That's why we don't have a couple ocean carriers in the room today, I think, all right? But if you do all those things together, you're going to get the increased utilization you want. The problem is we're looking at individual solutions. And in my role at AIAG, you know, I have the opportunity and the privilege to go out and talk to the OEMs. And I think what a lot of the OEMs are doing now is along this ways, but they're doing it individually. We need some sort of neutral and collective effort to analyze the entire FVL chain and find out where we can maximize utilization. You know, if you can get 4 ships a week instead of 2 ships a week, you're going to have your throughput's going to be much more effective at that particular port or particular port processor. But as long as we all go our different ways, it's not going to happen. We need, as Marc said, to reduce inventory days as part of waste and reduce dwell time. I mean, that's just has to happen as you guys want to get your products to your dealers in a quicker, more efficient way. We need to increase capital asset utilization. Bill touched on that. And we need better collaboration and cooperation because I think the delivery model for vehicles is going to change over time. We heard a little bit about that this morning. And we're going to be ready for that because we might be able to perfect the vehicle logistics system we have in place now, but are we ready for the one that's coming tomorrow? A few items about AIG. I've said it before, but relationships, reputation, and results. That's what we're all about. See me, see Lang, email me, call me. I'll tell you what we're doing. Look at our website. Look at the committees we have working now. We're doing some really good things on EPOD. We just finished phase 2, which was the rail phase. We're going into phase 3, which is the marine terminal and port processing phase. Okay. We're looking at a self-assessment guideline for ports and processors that we're getting ready to roll out. We're working with ECG on some more things down the line. We want to get this e-directory of services out. You know, and everybody says, well, what's in it for you? And this is something we came up with, and take a look at a lot of those key phrases in there, and I think you can identify them. So I appreciate your attention this morning. I'm glad those of you who know me didn't throw anything, and we'll see you for the next couple of days. Take care.
Thank you very much, Bill. Some very honest and true points made there. And I would like to reiterate about AIAG. As much as I think our conference is important, we are a talking shop. We hope we stimulate discussion and get people thinking differently. But perhaps to get anything done, that's where you need to turn to associations like AIAG in North America or ECG, which is the European Finished Vehicle Logistics Association in Europe. To be able to benchmark more or to encourage collaboration in a proper legal framework. So I think we've definitely thrown out some of the challenges, what people think are the biggest wastes. I don't know, you know, it's your part of the discussion now as well. So the usual sort of rules apply. If you've got a question or a comment, please raise your hand, wait for the microphone so that we can hear you. And then say your name and your company name, and then make your point or ask your question. So perhaps I'll throw it out to the audience a little bit first, just to get some other thoughts on what the biggest wastes are. To make it as difficult as possible for the guys who work with me, I'll start as far away as possible from them. I'd like to ask Mike Riggs, who's at the front here. Just your thoughts as from a Jack Cooper perspective. What do you see as some of the biggest wastes? If you can raise your hand, Mike, just so that the...
Thank you. Is this on?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I want to, first of all, put in a commercial, even though I have no ownership or anything, for Bill Kerrigan and his group. They're trying to do a lot of things that have been talked about for 10 or 15 years. So I would encourage everybody who's not involved, including OEMs, to speak with Bill, because it's one of the solutions to what seems to be a capacity crunch that hasn't gotten any better. But my first thought was, and maybe Marc, I haven't met you yet, and I apologize, but we have several thousand Teamster drivers out there, so obviously I'm hoping Mr. Jacobs' comments about automated trucks are there, but frankly, don't believe it's anytime near term. So we have to deal with the realities of today. And I guess from both an OEM, and maybe Bill can also address it, the point he brought up about accurate forecasts is particularly hammering to the carrier base, because to buy a truck-trailer combination now is $300,000. So you talk about being off, if we have 3,000 trucks out there anytime, by 10%, then that's 300 trucks and trailers I should have, not just the drivers, which are difficult enough to get in this environment, but when you have forecasts that routinely are 20, 25, 30% under what your actual productions are, it's virtually impossible to have the capacity to respond. And the excuses that we've always heard over and over are, look, we have a very accurate forecast for inbound because we know how many units we're going to build, but we can't tell you which ones are going to go rail, which ones are going to go trucks. So you kind of have to trust us that it'll all average out. And anybody that's been involved in the last few months know that the average on an annual basis hasn't been anywhere close. So we all look like we're underperforming, but if Danny Zink was in here, maybe he can give a timeline, but I think it's 3 or 4 months out before he can actually put something in his build order for trailers. The heavy trucks aren't much different. They're having record sales. So it could take somebody from the day they place an order 4 or 5 months to get capacity. And when, I can tell you in 10 years, we've talked about accuracy of forecasts, and it has made no progress, none, for us carriers. But this is the year that's been the most stunning to me in terms of how much more are hitting our production, our part. And I would just make a plea and ask if there's anything going on with AIG, with Inform, with Lamasoft, any of the network optimizers out there specifically to talk about the outbound trucking forecast. No disrespect to the railroads, but I have to focus on the trucking part. And we have not been within 25% on the average for a long time. And it's impossible, it's just physically impossible to respond. So what we're going to do is, like the industry's done forever, we're going to overorder trucks, we're going to overhire drivers, we're not going to be as efficient, and pray that the PwC's forecast guy was wrong, and that it's not going to go down in 5 years, because then we've just overordered and overhired, and we've got all this excess equipment. But I would just make a plea that it be a top 3 priority. I realize everybody has to focus on inbound. I realize keeping the plants is crucial. But the poor guys in outbounds, if you just look at the failures in our industry, Ryder's been in our industry, Swift's been in our industry, Accurate in liquidation, Performance in liquidation, Allied in liquidation, Blue Thunder in liquidation. This is an industry with a lot of tombstones up there, and it hasn't gotten one bit better in terms of that accuracy of forecast. So whether it's Bill or Mark, I just wanted to ask, you asked me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll probably get beat up later by my customers, but I'd like to know, what are we doing to try to make a more accurate forecast? Because frankly, we usually are told there's nothing we can do about it. Use where your current levels is to assess where you're going to be, and that's the best guess.
Okay, thank you. Very good point, and a good starting point, I guess. Forecast. It is the big challenge. You know, I remember one guy who happened to be in India, but he could have been anywhere around the world, and I asked him what one of his main tasks was. He's trying to work out how I can do good logistics without. He said, I just ignore the forecast. There's no point looking at the forecast. So I suppose, firstly, I'll turn to Mark, but then maybe if there's any solution providers out there, IT companies or anyone else, other car makers who've got thoughts. I'm guessing that it isn't the vehicle logistics department. You're as much victims of poor forecasting as anybody is. You know, any comments, thoughts on what we can actually do about it? What pressure can you put on your bosses? How can the industry together, whether it's AIAG or others, do to try and improve forecasting?
Well, I guess I'll start, excuse me, I'll start by saying we still deliver 17 plus million vehicles a year in the industry. So understanding that there may be capacity issues and there may be varieties in forecasts. But, you know, the forecast issue, Bill brought up in his presentation about managing exceptions, right? Well, if an exception happens year over year over year over year, it's no longer an exception, it's an actual part of the industry and part of the network. Forecast accuracy at the manufacturing level is very, very good. We build what we say we're going to build in a given year at a given plant. Parts and materials are able to be scheduled in. individually into those plants to build those vehicles get built. Where the variability comes into play is on the other side of the coin, which is impacted by global economics, regional economics, regional demand, sales plans, sales advertising. The exceptions that we deal with, that we all deal with, is the 20% of the vehicles that come out of the plant on forecast as scheduled that may need to do something different than what our original plan was. There may be quality issues that would have to pull those out. There may be sales issues that have to change the mix. For the most part, I think most OEMs will give you a forecast and give you, more than enough time, certainly at origin, but definitely further down into the supply chain, visibility as to where that vehicle, when it comes out of a plant, is going and needs to go. So, we can talk about exceptions, but those exceptions are the realities of the business that we're in. And, I think where the opportunity lies for us to do a better job on that 20% of inefficient forecasting, operational forecasting, is working together to have more dialogue around how do we purge those holds, how do we make those changes more effective and more visible to the carrier base. But the term forecasting, I think, is inaccurate for what the problem we're trying to describe is. So, I think there's dynamics in our industry, and there are definitely wasteful dynamics. We work every day within our own groups, and I imagine the other OEMs do the same thing. They work with manufacturing, they work with engineering, they work with supplier quality, they work with commercial operations in terms of allocations and vehicle distribution mix, so that we can put day-to-day programs and forecasts in place that people can go out and invest against. But I would argue that is going to be a variability in all of our processes going forward. We may move the needle 3 or 4 or 5% one way or the other, but we know what we're going to build at every plant. For the most part, manufacturers do that. The variability comes once it comes out of the plant, and there's maybe collaborative opportunities. There's maybe duplication of efforts that happen currently because we're dealt with individually as companies and as customers. Maybe that's where opportunities change. We've certainly found in the last 3 months that by providing or generating better visibility and sharing better visibility, particularly at destination ramps amongst the OEMs, that we've been driving a positive performance in dwell time. And so there are things that we're doing to improve upon the variability in our processes. But I don't think it's forecast accuracy. I think it's advanced planning, particularly if you're going to relate it to capital expense and capital planning. That's an advanced planning function, and we're all kind of at the vagaries of the market for that. So.
Okay, thank you. I was speaking to a guy who used to be in automotive, but now works at Amazon. In case you don't know them, they're a small bookshop. And he was saying that he feels that where automotive are not as far behind Amazon as we sometimes think when we're at conferences, but that's on the manufacturing side. He thinks we're quite good. The difference is that they collect better data from the customer, and the better data from the customer helps them to forecast better. Whereas perhaps at car manufacturers, our data comes from the manufacturing side and isn't accurate enough from the end consumer. So I don't know if that's, just kind of throwing that out there, if that's a fact. Are they car manufacturers as opposed to car sellers? We make cars, we know how many we're going to make, we know how many we want to make, and hopefully we'll sell them. Perhaps what will help the whole car industry, and definitely finished vehicle logistics, is if we collected better data from the end consumer. I mean, you might say that we are good at collecting data from the end consumer. That was just a perception from Amazon that they don't feel we collect enough. There's so much more data. You've got the websites, you've got the dealer sites, you've got all these opportunities to collect information from the end consumer that can help make your forecasting more accurate. Is that a fair criticism?
Well, I think Amazon relies mostly on its suppliers to make product available for demand, either through their own fulfillment centers or through supplier direct. And I think the sales cycles for those types of products that go through Amazon lend themselves more to maintaining inventory and having an emotional buy opportunity that I can translate today and get it in 3 days from now. Cars aren't bought that way. Cars aren't marketed that way. And we own all of our inventory from the day the parts arrive at the plant straight through to the vehicle. So it's definitely different dynamics. And the other thing, when you think about outbound logistics as it relates to the comparisons to what we do versus what an Amazon or any other e-fulfillment or omni-channel distributor has, is we don't have the luxury of being able to pass on alternative distribution costs to the purchaser. So if you want something in 2 days, you can pay $7.50 for it. If you're willing to wait 4 days, it'll be free. We don't have the flexibility and we don't have the capital structure to be able to respond to someone that wants to necessarily spend 20% more for a guaranteed delivery, or so I think structurally we're two very, very different industries. As data plays a bigger part in our industry, and visibility and being able to share performance data amongst a variety of platforms, I think we get pulled closer to comparisons with Amazon, comparisons with omni-channel fulfillment, but they're two very, very different markets. So.
Okay. Question in the middle here.
Hello, my name is Ruud Vossenbelt from Inform. I heard Mike Ricks talking about Inform and Lamasoft, about providers of software in this industry. Our observations in Europe are that transport companies, in some cases, feel that their car makers give them good forecasts. In some cases, they feel the forecasts are not that good. And when we listen then to what could be the reason, an aspect that comes up more and more, and I feel that's where other industries are going to as well, is that some car makers, they say, okay, you get a yearly forecast, you get a monthly forecast, and that's how you need to work it out, how you work with us. But the world is changing, I think, much more to real-time visibility. And real-time visibility, that's also where Amazon, where Uber is playing a big role these days. And that's where they win the additional service levels, where they can much more efficient. And I think when we look to the players now in the automotive industry, the car makers, who still give their, let's say, only monthly updates to the transport companies, I think it would be helpful if there are more tools in place that they could give updates more often than once a month in forecasting. But at the same time, the transport companies also know what to do with that information then. Because that's the other big challenge. They don't know what to do with the information that they get. So I think that's maybe an interesting task for AIAG and ECG to see, okay, how does that mechanism work, that both players can really work with each other when they share more information with each other. Maybe you can give me some comments, Marc, about how you see that from a Chrysler point of view.
Well, my first comment would be, how does Uber use information to forecast their demand? It's two different models. I mean, I get it, but we can keep on pointing to areas that are very good at doing certain things because there's a lot less complexity in the supply and demand function. But at the end of the day, Uber's relying on their drivers to sit and wait until something pings up, and having a variety of drivers cannibalize each other to go get the demand. So I'm not sure that Uber's benefiting from any forecast information, right? So, look, the forecast, I don't think it's a forecasting issue. I think it's a variability issue in our processes that I think we all We all identify as waste because usually it's post-manufacturing, so the vehicle's already built. So it's a waste component for us to have this variability in our distribution patterns. But the reality is that you have to have flexibility to react to demand and mix. And it's not as easy as calling UPS and giving them a box to go to Louisville versus a box to go to Memphis at no cost differential because they've already got the capacity. It speaks more, frankly, it speaks more to Bill's components about the need for specialized equipment within our industry. If you were all able to use your equipment for a variety of things and then redeploy, that's how every other industry works. This is specific, this is different. I think this is the variability in our processes for what comes out of a plant to where they eventually end up at a dealer, and let's say it's 10, 15, 20% of a variability from the forecast you would have gotten a week ago of what's coming out. 80 to 90% of the stuff is going to go exactly where we tell you it's going to go, unless there's a quality issue, which nobody's going to take the risk of letting go anyways. So I'm not to turn it around, but I applaud the industry, and certainly both the rail and truck industry. I applaud you in your ability to react to these ups and downs, and not just in the daily variability, but look what happened in 2008, and as much tension was created in the grow back, I still come back to the point that we're still delivering 17 million vehicles a year. The OEMs are selling everything they build. So there's opportunities to change that, but there's other areas that I think that we have other waste areas that I think we have direct control over collectively that we can all work together to reduce and improve. The capital structures of the individual companies, granted, are only going to be as good as the forecast that we give them individually as customers, but that proposition changes over time as well. You have to make a long-term commitment to your equipment, but your commercial contracts may only be going for 3 years or 5 years. You have to make a commitment whether you're going to be in the industry with the same customers you have today, or you're going to have a churn that you're going to have to deal with the capital. We do the same thing. We have the same challenges within those plants. So is that the primary thing we need to be addressing in terms of waste? I would argue that it's not. I would argue that it's a structural piece that's specific to our industry that we have to endeavor to work closely together to get better at it. But within our daily network, within the shared infrastructure and the shared service providers that we use as OEMs, I think there's plenty of opportunities to draw out more waste that makes your fleets more productive, even at the point where you may have higher empty miles, but it reduces your capital requirements if we get more productive as an industry. So.
And what about collaboration? I mean, I've got a kind of a true story, I suppose. I was at a car maker, or I heard a kind of story that they were shipping cars from Asia to Germany, so shipping them to the port of Koper, then trucking them to Germany. And there was a car maker who was trucking cars to the port of Koper and then shipping them to Asia. So I spoke to one of the car makers and said, did you know that this is happening? Why don't you speak to the other car maker to see what you can do to find, some kind of synergies? You're shipping trucks one way or trucking cars one way, and they're trucking cars the other way. And the first reaction was, why should I help the other car maker? I went and saw the other car maker who was in Asia, coincidentally a few months later, told them the same story, didn't say what the car maker said, but their reaction was, why should I help the other car maker? Is that, if that story had come to you, what would you have said, I don't want to help the other car maker, or would you have said, how would that benefit me?
I think anybody that's worked with me in this room knows that my answer would be, how do I help the other car maker to help me and get better in our network?
Yeah.
That's, I think that's changing. I think, to be honest, now, I'm no longer a young guy in this industry. I'm one of the older guys, but I think generationally we're starting to see a lot more openness at the OEM level to work together to solve common issues, to solve, where we've got duplication of efforts that's not a competitive advantage, where we've got investments that we have to make duplicate investments that have to be made that aren't competitive advantages, I think there's more than an opportunity to get together and try and solve some of that for the industry. So, I think you're going to see less and less of those responses because, again, as we're talking about waste, the reason we're talking about waste, or the reason everybody's looking at it, is because we want to reduce the waste to improve our cost margins and improve our profitability, improve our productivity. So with reducing the waste, everything cost comes down. Yeah. Right. So I think from our standpoint, there's going to be certain global costs and regional costs that when you look at it on paper and you start sharing some information, it makes no sense to be. It's too compelling not to go after. So.
And the trucking company was probably charging them one way, both ways. Sorry, Bill.
First of all, I'm looking out in this room, and I know there's 3 or 4 providers of some really, really good analytical tools out here, which we should take advantage of, cooperating between the OEMs. Secondly, I think Marc is, completely right in one respect, that logistics is reacting to, well, in a lot of respects, but I think you get dealt the hand you get, okay, when it comes to delivering vehicles, and you're falling on the sword a little bit. A lot of this is unallocated product. I always say, why don't we do a proof of concept? Why don't we look at one area in a network that we can approve? And if you looked at the numbers that Brandon put up this morning, when we talk about increased exports and decreasing imports, but I'm not so sure that's not going to be made up by short sea out of Mexico, or whatever you want to call deep sea, short sea. Being an ex-ocean guy, what happens with these forecasts, what happens with these vehicles is as they're traded off, that visibility window kind of closes and opens sometimes. And, these poor guys, and I won't defend all the ocean carriers, but with, $100 million vessels sitting at the ports, can't afford to sit for 3 days if that train's late or if that truck's late. And that window passes, and those ship sails, and once you close the ramp to that ship, you're not going to get that space back anymore. Maybe we need to look at certain areas of the business in which we can maybe make a difference now instead of trying to tackle, or eat the whole elephant right now.
Okay. Any comments or questions? On this side, please.
Hi, Evan Matthews with the Port of Davisville in Rhode Island. Bill, I just had a follow-up question. I know a lot of the ports, a lot of the terminals in other cargo types always talk about the Jones Act. And, is that something that you think, obviously it has its own politics, but is that something, being able to move vehicles by ship within the United States, do you think that's part of is that a possibility? Is that worth taking on the politics of?
Could it be a solution? Could it help alleviate the problem? Yeah, but it's not going to happen in my lifetime because of the inability of Washington, D.C. to work properly. How's that?
Yeah, we've actually asked that question to the Maritime Administration, and they pretty well said just no. It wasn't even, being considered. What about working with whether it's other industries, or anybody who moves vehicles, whether it's used cars, rental cars, again, so maybe out to one of the trucking companies, do you do a lot of that? Is it something that's important to you? Is that how you're filling up some of your empty miles? Is that an opportunity for you guys? Or do you already do that? I don't know, maybe Kathleen's on that one from United Road.
Yeah, thanks, Louis. I don't think United Road is alone in looking for remarketed vehicles to fill empty miles. There are opportunities to collaborate within the OEMs, too. So we tend to function in silos sometimes, and working with the remarketed leaders for an OEM with the manufacturing side as well, I think also has additional opportunity with it. But there's certainly no doubt that you can fill empty miles with remarketed. And especially when you look today at the volumes of used car sales. I think it was something like 42 million used car sales last year, and a lot of other activities. So there's real opportunity there to pull out waste for sure.
Okay. And I don't know, Marc, again, sorry, if you're working, I think that people are starting doing benchmarking with the Carlisle Group. I don't know if you've become involved in that, and if you're finding, opportunities there for, for eliminating waste. Is it just, are there, what can you get out of that benchmark or that working together through Carlisle Group to try and find improvements?
I'm a committed benchmarker. I have been for the last 20 years, and when it comes to finished vehicles, we've had a few fits and starts. This is my first year being involved with Carlisle's offering. I know there's a few companies that have tried to get it up and off the ground since the PRTM efforts in 2002, 2003. So we're participating, and I think the first year was last year, and we've made changes to it this year. And I think the more OEMs we get to involve and to come into the process, I think the richer the output's going to be. What I look for in benchmarking is really two things. Is it gonna show me actionable items, things that I could use, things that I could take from the insight and translate into improvements in my own area, in my own company, within the 12 months of the benchmarking. And then the second thing is it giving me enough of insight where I can educate not only my external service providers and supply base on why we do certain things and why the results are in a certain way, but also, frankly, to have some opportunity to educate folks within my own organization, maybe that are outside of the supply chain, that realize, that we'll read a Wall Street Journal article on Amazon and free delivery and everything else, and come back to us and say, why aren't we delivering cars for free? It gives us an opportunity to go back up and show them, this is where we fit within our industry. This is how we compare to our competitive set. We're good here because this is what we focus on based on our strategy, and we may be a challenger somewhere else, but that's by design in a lot of cases. But I think it's a long slog. I think for benchmarking to work, particularly in this industry, because of the specificity that we have around our operations and the capital requirements and the single commodity types of equipment, we need to have the staying power to do this year over year over year over year to get it good. Is it a blind commitment right now for me? No, but it's my first year with Carlisle. I think we've made improvements on what it was last year. I think out of this year we'll make improvements on what it will be next year. And the more OEMs that could look at it and find value in the approach, it's a peer-to-peer environment, which allows us to do a better job of comparing apples to apples. And I think 4 or 5 years down the road, I think we're going to have some real meaningful, actionable data coming out of it.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions? I just wondered if there was something. I mean, I suppose the main topic that came up was forecasting. I'm guessing that's not something that we're going to fix in the short term. I wondered if there was something that we can focus on because there's too many ways to try and work on. What can be done as an industry, whether it's through, probably likely to be someone like AIAG or ATA or AHA, the associations. What can we do to focus on one or two of the biggest waste to see if we can focus on them as a group to try and find solutions? Is that an option? Is that something that we should consider? Can we focus on one or two things? Is that a possibility? Maybe Bill Kerrigan on that? I don't know.
Well, Louis, we keep talking about all the other industries we have about data, right? Mm-hmm. And to the extent that the OEMs obviously want to keep some data privileged and confidential, that's good. But we need to look to a solution if we're going to have visibility and benchmarking where we can collect the data on the outbound side of the business, have it there so it can be analyzed by the OEMs internally and maybe blindly by the suppliers that are in the business. And until we get that, but I think that's something that could be easily done for not a lot of money, whether it's at AIAG or at Alice or any place like that. So.
Louis, to your point, Kevin Kaloran from WWL. Marc spoke a little bit about green initiatives and green initiatives that are out there. And you know, many of the logistics providers that are in this room are also smokestack industries and do quite a bit of polluting out there with stricter regulations that are coming up. CO2 footprint in the logistics chain is getting more and more prevalent, and we're watching it. Is that something that we as an industry could maybe collaborate and work closer together on pollutants and CO2 footprint and reducing that as a group? Yeah,
that's a good point, because perhaps, I mean, firstly, you know, environmental green issues, by trying to become more efficient there, that automatically means in many ways eliminating waste. And is that where the solutions are going to come from, where you're forced into them by regulations? Again, I might throw that at Bill Kerrigan, you know, as AIAG, and I know ECG are doing something similar in Europe on green initiatives and coming to some, you know, kind of agreements on working together.
We've had talks about this, Mike Sturgeon and myself, obviously, because we cross the outbound supply chain of all the, you know, the carriers. We haven't gone any further than that. We are certainly interested in helping in any way we can, and if the OEMs and or the carriers or suppliers bring it to our attention, we can do what we always do. We'll have a call to action. We'll investigate. We'll put the right players in the room, allow them to talk, and put up an action item list.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a final question for Bill Pawluk now. And I'm almost scared to ask this question because I know how passionate you are. But you've come up with a possible solution. So I'm not saying it's, you know, 100% correct or whatever, but it's a possible solution. The reaction you get from the industry, do you feel they're really committed to eliminating waste, or is it something that we talk about without really pushing through to make a difference?
Thank you, Louis, for the question. I'll be as politically correct as I can be, but I think people are driven by the bottom line, by finances, before doing the right thing. I don't like to say this, but it is the reality. And making profit is not an option. I totally understand that, get that. There are companies out there that are taking the first step, and it's taking a long time, there's no question. But for us to even consider that this isn't the future is simply not sustainable. We are burying our heads in the sand if we think otherwise. So I go to the people, I think they're called early adopters perhaps, and I appeal to their sense of doing what's right, not only trying to help themselves and making a better profit, but do what's right. And not subscribing to the school of waste, because that's what we're all doing here, knowingly. So when you ask me how people actually react, are they really committed to reducing waste? Yes, in ways that don't take them far from the center of today's processes and systems that they've developed. It's a big investment, of course, to change to a whole new idea, and there's risk involved in it, so everybody's risk averse. So I applaud the people that do make the proactive step of actually doing what's right, taking a little bit of risk. We all need to risk something or we're going to gain nothing. That's my analysis, so don't be afraid. We all got to put our toe in the water sooner or later. Come and join us.
Thank you. And I'll kind of refer back to how we first started Automotive Logistics. We were looking other areas of automotive to look into, whether it was electronics, whether it was supply chain, whatever it was. One of the automotive leaders at the time who pointed us toward logistics is a bit infamous now and probably not the most politically correct person to quote, but it was Dr. Lopez, who was then he was head of purchasing at Volkswagen then, having previously been head of purchasing for General Motors. But he said, he was Spanish by background, and he said, why can't we ship cars to Spain and oranges back from Spain? That was 20 years ago. So, you know, even then, in a way, the whole reason for Automotive Logistics as a magazine and conference was on that basis. How can we eliminate waste in a relatively simplistic form? And 20 years later, you know, we're not too close. But I think this session was to stimulate discussion. Unfortunately, I'm not sure we were ever going to come up with solutions to the biggest waste. But what I wanted us to do was start thinking about it, thinking about what are the biggest wastes out there. Can we attack them as a group? What can we start to work on? You know, through us, more than happy to be some kind of conduit to introduce you to build discussions, to cover it in the magazine and at future conferences. But there's, you know, amongst yourselves, there's enough associations out there who are willing to work with you to find out how we can eliminate some of the waste in the finished vehicle logistics supply chain. So, you know, have a think, have a good thought about what we can do to make these changes. Thank you very much to the panel for stimulating the discussion. Thank you. The next session on finished vehicle logistics will be about kind of looking outside of the USA, looking a bit more globally on finished vehicle logistics, and we're back in this room. But please join us for our lunch, which is hosted by UPDS. Thank you.